Well, welcome back to Talking Point. Thanks so much for joining us. We've just been talking about the recent events with the National Library pulling some children's titles from their shelves. And early on, we had a few callers touching on a few issues. One of them saying that perhaps the books could have been relocated to a specific area which perhaps had either a certain classification or parental supervision to check out those books. As parents, what do you all think about that?
I think I'm fine. I think that people who want to have access for their children to be exposed to these themes earlier are making their own value judgment and their choice. If the library can make these books accessible to these adults, the books not borrowed by the children but by the adults, then there's no issue. My concern is if the books continue to be freely accessible by anyone and anyone at all.
Okay.
That's.
But Adelia, you don't. Earlier, you're saying we shouldn't have it caged.
Yeah,
in a
I don't
certain
think
area.
it should be caged, and the reason I don't think that is because I think again it sends the message to children who come from these non-conventional families that they should be separated and they are different from the norm, and it really marginalizes these children. So based on that, I would prefer that they weren't separated. But then I also understand that it is a controversial topic, and so if separating the books means that the books remain on the shelves in some way or some form, then I would rather they be separated than for them to just be completely withdrawn.
Well, people have also talked about, not just these specific titles, but going back in time to fairy tales and nursery rhymes, and many of them seem a bit violent, a bit morbid. I'll give you the example of Hansel and Gretel, child abandonment and theft, So, when you say our children are reading those books, we're reading those books to our children. And in fact, educator Edmund Chow had posted this on YouTube about family values in children's stories. I'll share that clip with everyone right now. Let's listen in.
From a critical educator's perspective, it is important for us to start thinking critically on the social construction of certain characters. Why is it that all the stepmothers in all these fairy tales are cruel and evil? We have foster families, foster parents, and parents who have to remarry because of other circumstances. Once we are not critical of what we read, then we are assuming that all step-parents are cruel, and that is more dangerous from a pro-family perspective than anything else.
Well, Edmund is actually joining us right now from Google Hangout. He's in the United Kingdom, in Manchester. Edmund, thanks for joining us here on Talking Point. So,
thank you.
Yeah, so do we expect our children to take what they read at face value?
Well, that's a pretty difficult question to answer. I think reading is a very personal, pleasurable pursuit. It is hard to say that a child will only read it in one way. But from an educator's perspective or parent's perspective, I think we need to open up possibilities and interpretations to any story that is being read or consumed. So let's just say we have Cinderella. On the literal level, it is a girl triumphing over her adversities, her poverty, and finding her soulmate, for example. And then on an academic level, it's almost like bringing order to chaos, because there's a resolution at the end of Cinderella's tragic story. But I think as an educator or as a parent, for some of us, we want to inculcate intellectual curiosity and ask, first of all, what aspects of the story did you like? What's the ending like? Do you want to change anything about the story? And if the child is mature enough to engage in a dialogue, you can start talking about deeper issues about the construction of stepsisters. Why are they cruel? Why are they obese? And then if you have a person, a friend who is a little overweight, does that mean?
But Edmund, let me cut you off there, because in that sense, what you're saying is any book, for that matter, could be interpreted in almost whatever way the parent may choose to interpret.
Yeah, exactly.
So what about the books in question?
Because the books, I feel that we are now polarizing two issues, the LGBT community and the pro-life, pro-family community. But I don't see it as that. I think it's a larger issue, because the content within these books deal with a lot of issues and sensitive topics that even a child or adult has to negotiate.
Anyone? Perry?
Okay, maybe I'll bring the topic to a less controversial topic, but still related. On books. I have no problem with LGBT books, but I actually have a slight problem with books that portray girls with traditional gender stereotypes. So I would prefer my girls not to read so much books on Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty, because such books portray women as being the weaker sex, always needing a protection of some charming prince to come to the rescue. I mean, I don't freak out when my girl pick up such a book, but I consciously minimize contact with such books.
Because there are only so few real princes in the world.
Yes, and you can see that social norms has changed, and now the animation that is very popular is Frozen, whereby the female roles are actually very modern. So in bringing up this example, what I'm trying to say is that social norms change over time, and even at any particular time in time, different parents have different values, and they'll see various different themes portrayed in books differently. So we make different choices.
Actually, to some extent, I agree with Perry, and I think that those fairy tales, since becoming a parent, I realized that there are a lot of these messages that these fairy tales are portraying, which may not quite sit well with us in the end. But I think what makes this one a particularly hard pill to swallow with these three books and the like is because it hits right to the core of this family unit definition in the society. And whereas those other, like Hansel and Gretel you mentioned, talks about child abandonment and theft and things like that. But this one goes right to the heart of the family unit of a father and a mother and the child. And perhaps that is why there is such a response coming out resulting from what NLB did.
Well, actually, I quite disagree with that, because what is the definition of a family? You mentioned a father and mother and child, but in reality, there are families whereby it's single parent, there are divorced parents, there are orphans, there are families living with extended families, and there are LGBT families. So what is the norm? Is the norm the majority? I think that is something that we need to discuss and think about.
We have a caller on the line. We have Timothy. Timothy, you're with Talking Point. Go ahead, Timothy.
Hi, yes. Okay, so initially my comment was about, we've been talking about the values that, how should our public libraries behave? And I was like, okay, so why don't impose our own values on public, or on the library? What have they set out for themselves? And in their mission and vision, they talk about readers for life, learning communities, knowledgeable nation. And in their mission, we make knowledge come alive, spark imagination, and create possibilities. So I think it sort of doesn't. The actions of pulling such books out of the shelf are sort of counterintuitive to their mission and vision. But I want to sort of link back to what you guys are talking about, which is I just forgot that point. What were you guys talking about again?
Depends at which point in time. I'm afraid I can't help you there, Timothy.
Just before I just came on, I was
about the fairy tales.
Yeah. The fairy tale of
Hansel and Gretel or Cinderella?
No.
Well, Timothy, I tell you what, I have to cut you off because we do have another call on the line. Fine. But we got your note about the role of the library and how it seems to be juxtapose what they have. Thank you, Timothy. Esther, you're on the line with Talking Point. Esther?
Yes. Good evening.
Good evening. Go ahead, please, Esther.
My name is Esther. Now, this has been a hot topic to me because I have 2 children, and when my children are young, almost every week I bring them to the library. Now, when the children are at a very tender age, you are talking about nurturing. So when you are nurturing the child, you do not introduce too many complex things to the child. Now, in Singapore, there are actually a lot of choices, and there are a lot of all things are permissible, but not all are beneficial. So in view of that, we have to be selective, and I totally agree with what Ms. Eileen Ng did. She actually so selective and also kept the books away so that it will not confuse the children. It is just a very simplistic way to make things simple and say, look, this is what we are talking about, pro-family, and then when this concept is given to the children, it will pass on from generations to generation. Right. It has to be the right concept. Okay.
All right, Esther, thanks a lot. Thanks for calling in.
Thank you.
Thanks for your thoughts. Who wants to have a crack at this?
I think this... I have a few comments. So firstly, I think people have been people seem to allude to the fact that it's an alternative lifestyle, which sort of suggests that it's a choice. And I don't think that anybody chooses a choice, chooses to deviate from the norm consciously, especially when it comes to who they choose to love and so on and so forth. And secondly, simply calling something pro-family. So, I mean, one of the words that have been bandied around a lot in this topic is this word pro-family. I think it's a slight misnomer, and I think it shouldn't be called pro-family because at the heart, these books are about family. And one of the books that was withdrawn, not the Tango one, but the Who's in My Family, I've had the opportunity to read that book, and it's a beautiful book. It talks about your normal family, normal so to speak. It talks about families where the grandparents are in charge. It's so many different types. And I don't think we should just go and call it pro-family. I think let's call a spade a spade.
Well, we're not really arguing the interpretation of what a family is here, but more the role of the library. So this is a public library serving everyone in the country. What is its responsibility? Which way should it have gone? Because now some folks are saying, yes, they should have taken the books away. Others are saying, no, they should have been kept on. Michelle?
I mean, as a public body, they are accountable to the public. The question is which segment of the public, the vocal minority or the silent majority? Instead of using the words that have been thrown around, I guess what's happening here is we are not hearing a lot of the silent majority speak up, because they are also very worried about bringing up this topic and possibly aggravating the whole situation. So they are all holding back their opinions and their voices at this point in time. And what we hear a lot is what a very vocal minority speak up for this group of people. I think there are a lot of things that need to be clearer, as in we may disapprove, but it does not mean that we discriminate. It does not mean that we will go to exceeding ends to make others feel uncomfortable. Does not mean we do not accept. We can accept, but may not approve at this point in time. And as I think one of the callers pointed out, these norms will change over time. It's true, it will change.
Right.
But perhaps at this point in time, the silent majority is not ready.
Okay.
I think everybody is trying to speak up for the silent majority. I think the silent majority is very legendary. Everybody seems to be speaking on behalf of them. And I think, truth be told, I think the voices on both ends of the spectrum are vocal minorities. And my guess is that the silent majority in the middle, they could be religious, they could be non-religious. I think on this issue of the NLB withdrawing the books, I think they are quite against the NLB destroying the books. And I think what is quite palatable is for the NLB to actually have a more...
Sorry, I was going to say that's what we want to talk about later on. That the use of that word pulped, you know. The only time people liked it was in Pulp Fiction, I think. But otherwise, we do need to take off for a short breather. There's still more to come. You can see it's a great discussion going on here on Talking Point. When we come back, we'll ask if the library selection and review processes can also be improved. But a bit of a pop quiz for you. The National Library has a collection of 5 million items. Now, how many do you think it buys every year? I'll give you a few options, 100,000, 500,000 or 1 million. Think about it. Keep your views coming in. Give us a call, 66910028. Tweet us at TELTP. Back in just a bit.